Chosen one, why are you still here? Why didn't you give up when your spouse walked out? Why didn't you quit when the doctor handed you that diagnosis with that look in his eyes? Why are you still breathing when the weight pressing down on your chest at 3 a.m. should have crushed you by now? I'll tell you why. Something has already been decided about you. Listen to me carefully. This video didn't show up in your feed by accident. The algorithm didn't bring you here. Heaven interrupted your scroll because what I'm about to tell you in the next hour will explain every single thing you've been through and why you had to survive it. You didn't just click this video. You were summoned. For 70, 80, maybe 90 years, you've been carrying a question that follows you into every room, every sleepless night. Every moment you catch your reflection and barely recognize the person staring back. God? Did my life even matter? Here's what breaks my heart. You think you failed the test. You think all that suffering, those decades of barely holding on, those prayers that seemed to bounce off heaven's ceiling, those dreams that died in your hands, you think it meant God forgot about you. But what if I told you? You passed. Not barely, not by luck. You passed a test you didn't even know you were taking. An examination so brutal, so precise that most people quit halfway through. But you're still standing, still believing, still here. 1 Peter 1-7 tells us our faith is tested by fire, that it may be found to result in praise and glory and honor. The fire wasn't punishment, beloved. It was verification. Every tear was heaven checking your temperature. Every closed door was God measuring your endurance. Every betrayal was the Almighty testing if you'd still choose Him when choosing Him made no sense. And you did. Even when it hurt. Even when you were alone. Even when no one was watching. Before I go deeper, I want to pause and thank every single one of you who has supported this message through Super Thanks. Your generosity means more than you know. You're not just donating, you're helping spread light to others who feel alone in their calling. Whether you give or not, I'm deeply grateful for your presence here. Your support, your time, your attention, it all matters. And if this message resonates with your soul, go ahead and let the Spirit move your heart. Psalm 66:10 declares, "For you, God, tested us. You refined us like silver." They thought silver was valuable because it was rare, but silver is valuable because it survived the furnace. That's you. Before this hour ends, I'm going to tell you why the delay was necessary, why the pain had a purpose, and what God has been preparing you for while you thought you were being punished. But not yet. If something in your spirit already knows this is for you, stay with me. Comment below, "I stayed." Because what comes next changes everything. Tell me something. When was the last time someone looked you in the eye and said, "I see what you've been through, and I'm proud of you"? When was the last time anyone acknowledged the weight you've carried in silence for 40, 50, 60 years? They haven't, have they? Because the most important tests God gives aren't the ones with audiences. They're the ones with no applause, no witnesses, no recognition. Just you and heaven, in rooms so quiet you could hear your own heart breaking. You think the test was about your talent, your education, your resume? No, beloved. The test was about what you did when nobody was watching. What you chose when choosing right cost you everything. Who you remained when the world gave you every reason to become bitter, vengeful, hard. That's the test that matters. And you passed it without a single person noticing. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine a courtroom. But this courtroom has no jury, no spectators, no reporters scribbling notes, just you, standing before the judge of all creation. And he's not asking about your achievements. He's asking about Tuesday at 2 p.m. when your daughter called you stupid and you bit your tongue instead of lashing back. He's asking about that Friday night when you had $50 left and gave 20 to someone who needed it more. He's asking about the thousands of moments when you stayed faithful, even though faithfulness felt like drowning. Luke 16:10 cuts straight to the bone. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. You know what very little means? It means the moments that don't make the highlight reel. The unglamorous obedience. The silent restraint. The patience nobody sees. You've been faithful in little for decades. Showing up to a job that never promoted you. Caring for a spouse who stopped saying thank you. Praying for children who stopped calling. Tithing when your bank account was screaming. Forgiving when forgiveness made you look weak. Nobody threw you a parade. Nobody posted about your faithfulness on social media. Nobody gave you a trophy for not giving up when giving up would have been easier than breathing. But God saw it all. Matthew 6-4 promises, "Your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you." Not might reward you. Will reward you. Every act of hidden obedience, every private sacrifice, every tear you cried where no one could hear, heaven recorded it, time-stamped it, locked it in the vault of eternal significance. You want to know what you really passed? You passed the test of remaining soft in a world that rewarded hardness. You passed the test of staying kind when cruelty would have been justified. You passed the test of believing God when your circumstances screamed He'd abandoned you. Think about roots growing underground. For months, nothing visible happens. The surface looks dead, barren, abandoned. But beneath the soil, something magnificent is spreading, anchoring, strengthening, preparing to hold up a tree that will stand through storms that topple everything around it. That's been your life, hasn't it? While others were growing tall and visible, you were growing deep and hidden. While they were celebrated, you were being established. While they got the spotlight, you got the substance. And now, decades later, when the storms come, and oh, beloved, the storms are coming, they'll fall. But you'll stand, because your roots went down so deep in the secret place that nothing on earth can shake what heaven has anchored. You almost quit, didn't you? I know you did. There was that night in 1997 when you sat in your car in the parking lot and whispered, "God, I can't do this anymore." There was that morning in 2008 when you stared at the pills and thought about ending it all. There was that Sunday in 2015 when you walked out of church for what you swore was the last time. But something stopped you. Something whispered, "Not yet. Hold on. Just one more day." And you did. You held on when holding on made no logical sense. You endured when endurance felt impossible. You stayed faithful when faithfulness felt like a joke. That wasn't you, beloved. That was the Spirit of the living God holding you together when you'd fallen apart. You've been like a soldier, trained in complete darkness. No instructor telling you you're doing well. No comrades cheering you on. No medals pinned to your chest. Just you in the dark, learning to fight battles nobody else could see. Learning to stand when standing brought no recognition. Learning to obey when obedience brought no reward. But here's what most believers never understand. What you passed qualified you for something most of them will never touch. The easy tests produce easy faith. The public tests produce popular faith. But the silent tests, the hidden tests, the tests that break you in places nobody sees, those produce the kind of faith that moves mountains. God doesn't give His deepest assignments to the celebrated. He gives them to the tested, to the proven, to the ones who stayed faithful when faithfulness felt like death. If you know you stayed faithful when no one noticed, type "I endured." Because what I'm about to tell you next will explain why every silent year, every hidden sacrifice, every unnoticed act of obedience was actually preparing you for the unveiling of a lifetime. You know what tortures you more than the pain itself? It's watching someone half your age walk into the blessing you've been praying for since 1987. It's seeing your neighbor's grandkids visiting every Sunday while your phone stays silent. It's scrolling through Facebook and seeing people celebrate victories you've been begging God for through 4 different decades. And somewhere deep in your chest, that question rises like bile. God, why not me? Why them and not me? What did I do wrong? Listen to me, chosen one. Stop right there. Because what I'm about to tell you will shatter every ounce of regret you've been carrying. The delay wasn't rejection, it was protection. You see, we've been taught to believe that God's favor looks like speed. that blessing arrives early, that if he really loved you, doors would fly open the moment you knock. But that's not how the master works with his masterpieces. That's not how the refiner treats his gold. Let me take you to Habakkuk 2-3. The prophet is crying out, desperate, wondering why God's promise is taking so long, and God answers with words that should stop you in your tracks. For the vision awaits an appointed time. It speaks of the end and will not prove false. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay. Did you catch that? It will not delay. Not might not, not probably won't. It will not delay. Which means every single day you thought God was late, he was actually right on time. But here's what breaks my heart. You've been comparing your chapter 20 with someone else's chapter 3. You've been measuring your August against their January. You've been looking at their beginning and calling it your ending. God doesn't work on assembly lines, beloved. He works on appointments. Divine appointments, kairos moments, the fullness of time. Think about Joseph, 17 years old when God gave him that dream. Bow down, really? His brothers bowing to him? That cocky kid probably told everyone at dinner. Probably strutted around thinking his promotion was coming next Tuesday. But God said, not yet. 13 years later, Joseph is still waiting. 13 years of pit, 13 years of slavery, 13 years of false accusations and forgotten promises. If Joseph had Instagram, his feed would have been silent for over a decade while everyone else was posting their victories. But here's what Joseph didn't understand in that prison cell, and here's what you haven't understood in your waiting room. God was hiding him, not from the blessing, from the destruction. If Pharaoh had elevated that arrogant 17-year-old, Egypt would have starved. If God had given Joseph power before prison gave him character, millions would have died. The very people Joseph was called to save would have been destroyed by his immaturity. The delay wasn't punishment. It was preparation for a weight his 17-year-old shoulders couldn't carry. Now let me ask you something that's going to cut deep. What would have happened if God had given you that financial breakthrough in 1995 when you were still broken inside? What would have happened if he'd healed your marriage in 2003 when you still hadn't healed yourself? What would have happened if he'd opened that door in 2010 when you were still carrying bitterness from 1987? I'll tell you what would have happened. The blessing would have become your burden. The answer would have destroyed you. The very thing you begged for would have buried you. God hides what he values. He doesn't display his diamonds in the driveway. He doesn't leave his treasures on the front porch where thieves can steal them. He hides them, protects them, guards them in secret places until the appointed time. You think you've been hidden because you're forgotten? No, beloved. You've been hidden because you're priceless. God has been insulating you from exposure that would have annihilated you. Every door that closed in your face was God's hand pushing you back from a cliff you couldn't see. Every opportunity that slipped through your fingers was heaven redirecting you from a disaster disguised as a blessing. Every delay that made you weep was actually mercy keeping you alive. You survived what should have destroyed you because God wrapped you in hiddenness like a shield. But here's the climax that's going to wreck you. Here's the moment everything shifts. If God had released it earlier, it would have destroyed you. But now you're ready. Now your character matches your calling. Now your wisdom can steward what your youth would have squandered. Now your humility can handle what your pride would have weaponized. The same blessing that would have crushed you at 40 is about to crown you at 70. The same door that would have led to your downfall in 2005 is about to open to your destiny in 2025. The same promise that would have broken you then is about to complete you now. You weren't passed over, chosen one. You were being prepared. Take a breath right now. Let that sink into the deepest place in your spirit. Whisper it if you need to. Now I understand. Because everything you thought was a no was actually a not yet. And the not yet just became right now. But there's something else you need to know about what happened while you were hidden. Something that's going to explain why your pain wasn't random. You know what no one tells you about growing old with God? The closer you get to Him, the quieter He becomes. And that terrifies you, doesn't it? Because for 70, 80 years, you've been taught that God's voice means He's pleased, that His presence equals His words, that if you can't hear Him, something must be wrong with you. But what if I told you the opposite is true? What if silence is God's highest compliment? Listen to me carefully, beloved. When you were young in the faith, God spoke constantly. Every prayer got an answer, every question received clarity, every step came with confirmation. But somewhere along the way, the conversation stopped. The signs dried up. The burning bush went cold. And you've been wandering through decades, wondering if you did something wrong, if you sinned too much, if God finally got tired of listening to you. Here's the truth that will shatter everything you thought you knew. God withdraws His voice when He trusts what He placed inside you. Think about this. When you taught your children to walk, did you hold their hands forever? No. There came a morning when you let go. You stepped back. You watched them wobble, watched them fall, watched them cry for you to come back. But you didn't run to them, did you? Not because you stopped loving them, because you knew something they didn't know yet. They could do it. The strength was already in their legs, the balance was already in their bones, they just needed to discover it without your hand. That's what God's been doing with you. Every silent prayer wasn't rejection, it was residency. God moving from speaking over you to living inside you. Every unanswered cry wasn't abandonment, it was activation. Heaven waiting for you to use what's already been downloaded into your spirit. Psalm 46:10 commands us, "Be still and know that I am God." Not be still and I'll speak, not be still and I'll answer. Be still and know. The knowing comes in the silence. The revelation happens in the waiting. The transformation occurs when God stops explaining Himself and starts expecting you to remember who He is. But why does it hurt so much? Why does silence feel like punishment when it's actually promotion? Because you've been conditioned to measure God's love by His noise. But mature love doesn't need constant conversation. Mature love trusts in the quiet. Your spouse of 50 years doesn't need to tell you they love you every 5 minutes. You know, you've walked through enough hell together that silence becomes its own language. That's where you are with God right now. Malachi 3:3 says, "He will sit as a refiner and purifier of silver." Do you know what a refiner does? He doesn't shout at the silver. He doesn't explain the process to the metal. He sits in complete silence, watching, waiting. The refiner knows exactly when the impurities are gone. He knows the precise moment the silver is pure. And how does he know? When he can see his own reflection in it. God has been sitting in silence, watching you burn, because He's waiting to see His reflection in your life. Every financial crisis where you still tithed, every health scare where you still praised, every betrayal where you still forgave, every door that slammed in your face and you still said, "Nevertheless, Thy will be done." You thought God wasn't watching. He was. You thought He wasn't listening. He was taking notes. The silence wasn't absence, it was observation. But here's what breaks my heart about this generation of believers. You've been so traumatized by God's silence that you've stopped moving. You've planted yourself in the waiting room and called it faith. You've convinced yourself that if God isn't speaking, you shouldn't be acting. That's not faith. That's fear. Faith without feedback is the highest form of trust. Abraham walked 3 days to Mount Moriah in complete silence. No angel, no voice, no confirmation, just the memory of a promise and a knife in his hand. 3 days of wondering if he heard God correctly. 3 days of his son asking questions he couldn't answer. 3 days of silence so thick it could suffocate hope. But Abraham kept climbing. Noah preached for 120 years. 120 years. And the Bible never records God speaking to him once during that entire time after the initial command. Can you imagine? Building a boat for over a century with nothing but the echo of an old conversation and the mockery of everyone you know. But Noah kept building. You've been waiting for God to speak again before you move. But what if the last thing he said was enough? What if that promise he whispered 20 years ago is still active? What if the silence isn't him changing his mind, but him expecting you to remember his word? Think about a seed. You plant it in the ground, and then what happens? Darkness, silence, isolation. If that seed could think, it would believe it's been buried alive. It would cry out, "God, where are you? Why did you abandon me to this grave?" But the gardener isn't absent. He's watching, waiting, trusting the process he set in motion. And one morning, without announcement, without fanfare, without explanation, something green breaks through the soil. You are that seed right now. God hasn't been silent because he left. He's been silent because he's watching what he planted in you finally break through the surface. All those years of darkness weren't wasted. They were necessary. Roots don't grow in the light. They grow in the deep, in the dark, in the silent places where no one's watching but God. If you stayed faithful in silence, comment, "Still I waited." Because what you're about to discover is this: the silence was never empty. It was full of God's loudest work. He was transforming you from someone who needs to hear his voice to someone who has become his voice. And that kind of transformation doesn't happen in the noise. You know what nobody tells you about getting old? It's not the body that gives out first. It's the heart. Not the organ pumping blood through your veins. I'm talking about that sacred chamber where you used to keep your dreams, your hope, your fight. And somewhere between burying your spouse and watching your children build lives that don't include you, between the diagnosis that changed everything and the bank account that never quite recovered, between praying prayers that heaven seemed to ignore and smiling through pain, nobody else could see something inside you didn't just bend. It broke. I'm talking to the grandmother who raised 5 children and now sits alone in a house full of photographs of people too busy to call. I'm talking to the man who worked 43 years at the same plant, got a gold watch they misspelled his name on, and wonders if any of it mattered. I'm talking to every senior citizen who has whispered into the darkness, "God, I can't do this anymore." You think that moment, that 3 a.m. breaking point, when you finally admitted you were drowning, you think that was your defeat. Listen to me carefully, beloved. That was your coronation. See, the world has lied to you about what breaking actually means. They told you breaking equals failing. They told you strong people don't fall apart. They told you good Christians smile through the storm and never ever admit when the weight is too much. But that's not what Scripture says. Psalm 34:18 declares something that will shatter every religious facade you've been holding up. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Did you catch that? God doesn't come close to the put together. He doesn't show up for the ones who have it all figured out. He draws near to the broken. You didn't break because you were weak. You broke because you were carrying too much alone. Think about it. How many pounds of grief have you carried? How many tons of disappointment? How many years of smiling when you wanted to scream, of saying "I'm fine" when you were dying inside, of being strong for everyone else while your own soul was hemorrhaging? You know what breaks my heart? The church told you to have faith, so you buried your questions. Your family needed you to be the rock, so you swallowed your pain. Society said seniors should be satisfied and settled, so you pretended that the fire in your chest, that desperate, aching longing for something more, wasn't real. But it is real. And it's been burning you alive from the inside out. Here's what the enemy doesn't want you to know. God breaks vessels he intends to fill, not destroy. Fill. There's a story in Scripture about a woman who broke an alabaster jar of expensive perfume and poured it on Jesus' feet. The religious people were furious. "What a waste!" they shouted. But Jesus said something that still echoes through eternity. "She has done a beautiful thing." That jar had to break for the fragrance to be released. The perfume couldn't pour out until the container was shattered. And you, dear one, you've been that alabaster jar, beautiful on the outside, holding something precious on the inside, but completely sealed, completely contained, completely unable to release what you were carrying until life broke you open. Every tear you've cried, that's the fragrance of worship pouring out. Every moment you fell to your knees and said, "I can't," that's the perfume of surrender filling the room. Every time you broke down and let God see the real you, not the strong you, not the spiritual you, but the shattered, desperate, barely holding on you, that's when heaven leaned in and whispered, "Finally, now I can work with this." You've spent 70, 80, 90 years thinking you had to hold it together, but God was waiting for you to fall apart. Because only broken soil can receive seed. Only cracked vessels can let the light shine through. Only shattered hearts can hold the kind of compassion that heals other people's wounds. The world sees your breakdown and calls it failure. God sees your breakdown and calls it breakthrough. But here's what's going to wreck you. Here's what's going to make everything you've been through suddenly make sense. That moment when you broke, when you finally couldn't carry it anymore, when you stopped pretending, when you admitted you were drowning, that wasn't the end of your story. That was the beginning of your authority. See, you can't comfort someone in a pit you've never been in. You can't speak hope to the hopeless if you've never known despair. You can't tell someone God is faithful in the darkness if you've only known him in the light. But you've been to the bottom. You've walked through the valley of the shadow of death. You've sat in the ashes and wondered if resurrection was even possible. And you're still here. That's not survival, beloved. That's a testimony. That's proof that breaking doesn't mean dying. That's evidence that God keeps his promises even when everything else falls apart. Every person who looks at you and sees just another senior citizen has no idea what they're looking at. They see wrinkles. God sees wisdom earned in the furnace. They see someone past their prime. Heaven sees someone who's been refined like gold. They see weakness. The Almighty sees a warrior who's still standing after battles that would have destroyed lesser souls. You are not broken goods. You are broken open. And what's pouring out of you now, that compassion, that depth, that ability to sit with someone else's pain without trying to fix it, that's the fragrance of someone who's been shattered and remade by the Master's hands. If you're still standing, even if you're trembling, even if you're barely holding on, even if you feel like you're one crisis away from completely falling apart, I need you to do something right now. Type in the comments, "I still stand." Because that declaration isn't just words, that's your weapon. That's you telling hell that it tried to break you but couldn't kill you. That's you announcing to heaven that you're still here, still believing, still ready for whatever God has next. But what comes next requires something from you that might terrify you. It requires you to stop being ashamed of your scars and start seeing them as your credentials. But here's what nobody tells you about passing the test. Here's what the enemy doesn't want you to know as you stand on the edge of your breakthrough. The closer you get to your destiny, the more convincing the counterfeits become. Listen to me very carefully, chosen one. You've survived the wilderness. You've endured the refining fire. You've passed tests that would have destroyed lesser souls. But right now, in this exact season of your life, you are entering the most dangerous territory you've ever walked through. Not because God has left you, but because the enemy knows his time with you is running out. 2 Corinthians 11:14 warns us with chilling clarity. Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. Did you catch that? Masquerades. He doesn't show up with horns and a pitchfork. He shows up looking like your answered prayer, sounding like divine confirmation, feeling like the breakthrough you've been begging God for. And that's exactly what makes this season so deadly. You see, the devil is a master counterfeiter. He's been watching you for 70, 80, 90 years. He knows what you've been praying for. He knows what you're desperate for. He knows the exact shape of the blessing you've been waiting for. And right now, as heaven prepares to release the real thing into your life, hell is manufacturing a fake that looks so close to the original you could reach for the wrong one and never know it until it's too late. Think about Jesus in the wilderness. 40 days of fasting, 40 days of preparation, 40 days of divine alignment. And when did Satan show up? Not at the beginning, at the end. When Jesus was hungry, vulnerable, ready for the Father's provision, that's when the tempter came with 3 offers that sounded almost right, almost scriptural, almost from God. If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become bread. Logical, right? Jesus was hungry. He had the power. Why not use it? Because the enemy was offering the right thing at the wrong time, through the wrong source. This is your moment, beloved. This is your wilderness temptation. And I need you to understand something that could save your entire destiny. Not every open door is from God. I know that sounds harsh. I know you've been waiting so long for any door to open that you're ready to run through the first one that cracks. But hear me. An open door is not confirmation. Opportunity is not anointing. Just because something is available doesn't mean it's appointed. How many of you right now are staring at an opportunity that showed up out of nowhere? A relationship that suddenly seems possible. A chance to finally prove yourself, finally be seen, finally get what you deserve. And it feels like God. It sounds like breakthrough. It looks like blessing. But something in your spirit feels off. That uneasiness, that's not doubt. That's discernment. That's the Holy Spirit in you, recognizing that the signature doesn't match. Because every divine assignment comes with a divine signature. And that signature is peace, not excitement, not opportunity, not even provision. Peace. Colossians 3:15 tells us, "Let the peace of God rule in your hearts." That word rule in Greek is brabouo. It means to act as an umpire, to decide, to settle. Peace isn't just a feeling, chosen one. Peace is the referee. When you're standing between 2 doors, 2 choices, 2 possibilities. So let me ask you something that's going to cut deep. That door that opened, that offer that came, that person who suddenly showed up in your life after all these years of waiting, do you have peace about it? Or do you have pressure? Because here's the difference. God invites. The enemy pressures. God gives you time to pray. The enemy gives you deadlines. God brings confirmation. The enemy brings confusion disguised as urgency. You need to decide now, or you'll miss it. That's not God talking. Everyone else thinks this is perfect for you. That's not divine confirmation. You've waited long enough. You deserve this. That's not biblical thinking. The enemy only counterfeits what's about to be real. Think about that. Why would Satan waste his time creating a fake if the real thing wasn't already on its way to you? Why would he work overtime to manufacture a counterfeit blessing if God wasn't preparing to release the authentic one? Your spiritual warfare isn't random, beloved. It's strategic. Hell is scrambling to intercept what heaven has already dispatched. But here's what you need to know. The counterfeit always comes with strings. It always requires compromise. It always asks you to move before you pray, to decide before you have peace, to act before you hear clearly from God. The real blessing, it comes with rest. It comes with confirmation. It comes with the peace that surpasses all understanding, even when the circumstances don't make sense. I'm watching too many chosen ones in this season grab the counterfeit because they're tired of waiting. They're so desperate for change that they'll take anything that looks like progress. But let me tell you something that might save your life. A counterfeit blessing will cost you more than the wilderness ever did. Because when you step through the wrong door, you don't just miss the right one. You delay it. You complicate it. You add years to your journey that were never in God's original plan. So, what do? How do you know? You wait for peace. You pray for discernment. You refuse to move until the signature matches. You choose alignment over opportunity. You choose God's timing over your desperation. If you're standing at a crossroads right now, if you're being pressured to make a decision that doesn't sit right in your spirit, if you're feeling rushed, confused, or torn, stop. Right there, stop. That uneasiness is God's protection. That hesitation is heaven's hand on your shoulder saying, "Not this one. Wait for what I'm sending." If you choose peace over pressure, if you choose to wait for God's authentic blessing instead of settling for the enemy's counterfeit, type in the comments right now, "I choose alignment," because what's about to happen next will prove that your discernment just saved your destiny. You want to know what you've been waiting for all these years? You think it's a check in the mail, a healing, a relationship restored, and yes, beloved, those things may come. But what God has for you is so much deeper than what you've been praying for. Listen to me carefully. You didn't pass the test to get more stuff. You passed the test to become someone else entirely. See, most people think God's rewards look like earthly blessings, a bigger house, better health, financial breakthrough. And I'm not saying God won't bless you materially, He will. But if that's all you're expecting, you're thinking too small. You're still living at ground level when heaven has been preparing you for elevation. The promotion is internal before it's ever external. Think about this. When David was anointed king, did he get the throne that same day? No. He got sent back to the sheep. For years. Anointed, but not enthroned. Chosen, but not crowned. And in those years of waiting, something shifted inside him. He stopped being a shepherd boy who could fight and became a king who could lead. The anointing came first, but the transformation came through the waiting. You've been anointed for decades, haven't you? You felt the call when you were young. You knew there was something different about you. But then life happened. Marriage fell apart. Kids broke your heart. Money disappeared. Health failed. And you started thinking, maybe I heard wrong. Maybe God chose someone else. But here's what you didn't see. While you were surviving what should have killed you, while you were getting back up when staying down would have been easier, while you were choosing faith when your mind screamed quit, God was doing something in you that couldn't happen any other way. He was making you trustworthy. See, forgiveness is free. Every sinner gets that. But trust is earned. And God doesn't trust just anyone with the kind of authority He's about to release through you. You think He's been silent? No. He's been watching, testing, measuring, waiting to see if you'd still praise Him in the fire, if you'd still believe Him in the dark, if you'd still choose Him when choosing Him cost you everything. And you did. That's why you're different now. That anxiety that used to control you, it's gone, isn't it? Not because life got easier, but because something inside you shifted. You're not afraid anymore, not like you used to be. You've seen too much, survived too much. You know who holds you now. Authority has replaced anxiety. Romans 8:18 says it this way, "I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us." Not to us, in us. The glory isn't something you receive from outside. It's something that emerges from inside, from the place where you've been refined. You remember that parable Jesus told, the one about the servants and the talents? When the master returned, he didn't just hand out rewards randomly. He looked at who was faithful with what they'd been given. And to those servants, the ones who multiplied what they had, who stayed faithful in the waiting, who didn't bury their calling in the ground, he said 5 words that will echo through eternity. "Well done, good and faithful servant." Not "well done, you who had it easy." Not "well done, you who never struggled." "Well done, faithful servant," the one who stayed when others left, the one who believed when doubt made more sense, the one who kept going when quitting was the logical choice. That's you, chosen one. But here's what most people miss about that parable. The reward wasn't just more talents. The reward was greater responsibility. The reward was promotion into the master's joy. The reward was entrance into a level of intimacy and authority they'd never experienced before. You didn't pass the test to get comfortable. You passed to get dangerous. Dangerous to every force of hell that's been whispering you're done. Dangerous to every generational curse that's been plaguing your family. Dangerous to every voice that said you'd never amount to anything. Because now you carry something they can't touch, the authority of someone who's been tested and proven faithful. This is what the enemy feared all along. Not that you'd be blessed, that you'd be transformed. Not that you'd receive something, that you'd become someone. Someone who knows God not just in theory, but in the trenches. Someone who doesn't just quote scripture but embodies it. Someone who's walked through the valley and came out carrying the shepherd's voice. The test didn't change God's mind about you. It changed your capacity. You couldn't have handled this 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. You would have broken under the weight of what God's about to trust you with. But now you've been stretched, enlarged, deepened. The vessel that could only hold a cup can now hold a river. And beloved, what's about to flow through you isn't just for you. It's for your children who are drowning in confusion, your grandchildren who need to see what real faith looks like, your community that's desperate for someone who's actually walked with God and lived to tell about it. You are the answer to prayers you've never heard, the hope for people you've never met, the proof that God still keeps His promises, even when the journey takes longer than expected. So when you wake up tomorrow and you still feel that fire in your chest, that restlessness in your spirit, that sense that something is about to shift, don't ignore it. That's not anxiety. That's anticipation. That's heaven getting ready to show you what you've been qualified to carry. But there's something you need to understand about this new authority, this new level you're stepping into. It comes with instructions you've never received before. And if you miss what I'm about to tell you next, you'll have the anointing, but not the wisdom to steward it. Listen to me very carefully, beloved. What I'm about to tell you might save your eternal destiny. You passed the test. You survived the fire. You made it through the valley when everyone else turned back. But here's what nobody warned you about. Here's the truth that's cost more chosen ones their crowns than any demon ever could. The most dangerous moment of your life isn't during the battle. It's right after you win. Let me paint you a picture that's going to cut straight to your soul. You've been climbing a mountain for 70 years. 70 years of scraped knees and bleeding hands. 70 years of looking up at that summit, wondering if you'd ever reach it. And then one day, finally, you make it. You stand at the top. And that's exactly when you fall. Why? Because you stopped climbing. You thought reaching the peak meant you could rest. You thought passing the test meant the war was over. But chosen one, passing the test wasn't your finish line. It was your starting line. Right now, some of you are living in the most dangerous gap of your entire existence. You've survived hell itself. You've outlasted betrayal, bankruptcy, disease, depression. You've buried people you loved and dreams you carried. You made it through when stronger people quit. God looked at you and said, "This one passed." But now you're tired. Bone tired. Soul tired. The kind of tired that makes you think, "I've done my part. I've earned my rest. Let someone else carry the torch now." And the enemy is whispering, "You've earned it. Sit down. You've done enough." That whisper has destroyed more warriors than any sword. The Apostle Paul saw this coming 2,000 years ago. He looked at the Galatian church people who had started on fire for God and asked them the most haunting question in Scripture. Are you so foolish? After beginning by means of the Spirit, are you now trying to finish by means of the flesh? They started in power. They're ending in pathetic. They began in the supernatural. They're finishing in the natural. They launched with heaven's fire. They're landing in earth's dust. Does that sound familiar? Have you noticed yourself doing that? You used to pray with authority. Now you barely whisper. You used to worship with your whole heart. Now you mouth the words. You used to believe for miracles. Now you settle for manageable. You didn't lose your faith. You just got tired of fighting for it. Here's what breaks my heart about the children of Israel. God delivered them from 400 years of slavery with signs and wonders that shook Egypt to its core. Plagues, parted seas, pillars of fire, manna from heaven. They saw God show up in ways that would make your miracles look ordinary. But 6 weeks into the wilderness, just 6 weeks, they're crying to go back to Egypt, back to slavery, back to bondage, back to the very thing that was killing them. Why? Because freedom was harder than they expected. Because the journey took longer than they planned. because they were tired of eating manna when they remembered the fish and cucumbers of Egypt. They would rather go back to chains they knew than push forward into promises they couldn't see. And God let a whole generation die in the desert because they quit between the test and the testimony. Listen to me, the enemy doesn't need to destroy you anymore. He already tried that and failed. You're still here, you're still standing, you're still believing. He can't kill what God has marked for life. So now he's switched tactics. Now he doesn't need to destroy you. He only needs to distract you. A distracted warrior is just as useless as a dead one. He'll send you good things that aren't God things, comfortable opportunities that feel like blessings but are actually detours, relationships that make sense to your flesh but grieve your spirit, rest that feels earned but wasn't authorized. And here's his masterpiece. He'll make you believe that settling is wisdom, that lowering your expectations is maturity, that trading your calling for comfort is called knowing your limits. But you don't have limits. You have a limitless God living inside mortal flesh. I need you to hear this with every fiber of your being. You did not survive everything you survived just to live a quiet, comfortable, forgettable life. You did not pass tests that destroyed other people just to spend your final years in a rocking chair wondering what could have been. God didn't refine you in fire so you could retire in fear. So, let me ask you a question that's going to either wreck you or resurrect you. What have you stopped doing since you made it through? What fire have you let die? What boldness have you traded for safety? What prophetic edge have you dulled because people said you were too intense? When was the last time you prayed like someone's eternity depended on it? When was the last time you spoke truth that made people uncomfortable? When was the last time you took a risk that required God to show up, or you'd fall flat on your face? If it's been a while, you're in the gap. The dangerous gap. The place where warriors become spectators, where survivors become settlers, where the chosen become the comfortable. And comfortable chosen ones don't shake kingdoms. They don't cast out demons. They don't raise the dead or heal the sick or speak with authority that makes hell tremble. They just exist, taking up space, counting down days, waiting to die instead of living to declare. Is that what you survived for? Is that why God kept you alive when others fell, so you could spend your final chapter playing it safe? The gap is closing, beloved. This season of rest between your test and your testimony is ending. God is about to promote you into purpose so powerful that everything you've been through will finally make sense. But you have to keep walking. You have to refuse the comfort of going backward. If you refuse to go backward, if you're ready to keep walking, even when you're tired, even when it's hard, even when nobody's cheering anymore, type it right now. I keep walking. Because what God is about to release in the next season requires someone who passed the test and refused to quit in the gap. But before I show you what's waiting on the other side, you need to understand why the delay wasn't denial and why God's timing in your life has been absolutely perfect. You've felt it, haven't you? That slow, suffocating distance. Your own children calling less. Old friends suddenly too busy. Church members who used to seek your wisdom now avoiding eye contact in the fellowship hall. And the worst part? Nobody tells you why. You lie awake at 3 a.m. replaying conversations, wondering what you did wrong. Did you say something? Did you change? Did you become too much, too intense, too different? Listen to me, chosen one. What if I told you that you didn't do anything wrong? What if the real reason people are pulling away has nothing to do with you failing and everything to do with you passing? Here's the truth they won't tell you in Sunday school. When God elevates your frequency, not everyone can tune in anymore. Think about it like this. You're standing in your kitchen, turning the dial on an old radio. Station 88.5 comes in crystal clear music, voices, static free. But then something shifts. The signal changes. Suddenly, you're picking up 105.7, a completely different frequency. And here's what happens. The people who were perfectly content listening to 88.5, they can't hear what you're hearing anymore. Not because they're bad people, not because you're better than them, but because you're literally operating on a different wavelength now. That's what happened to you. God turned your dial. After everything you've survived, the losses that should have destroyed you, the betrayals that should have made you bitter, the decades of unanswered prayers that should have killed your faith, something fundamental shifted in your spirit. You passed the test, and passing changed your frequency. 2 Corinthians 5:17 says it plainly, "If anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come, the old has gone, the new is here." But nobody tells you what happens when you become new, and everyone around you stays old. Nobody prepares you for the loneliness of transformation. Your daughter doesn't call as much anymore, not because she doesn't love you, but because every time she talks to you now, something in your voice convicts her. Your peace exposes her chaos. Your faith highlights her doubt. Your presence reminds her of everything she's running from. So she pulls back. Not in hatred, in self-protection. That friend you've known for 40 years, the one who suddenly got too busy for coffee, she's not mad at you. She's uncomfortable around the new you, because you don't complain anymore. You don't gossip anymore. You don't feed the drama anymore. And without those old connection points, she doesn't know how to relate to you. But here's what breaks my heart. You've been blaming yourself. You've been shrinking back, trying to dim your light so others feel comfortable. You've been apologizing for your growth, downplaying your peace, hiding your joy, all because you think something's wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with you, beloved. You're just on a different floor now. Imagine you're in an elevator. For years, you've been on the 3rd floor with a group of people. You laughed together, struggled together, survived together. But then your elevator starts moving. 4th floor. You're rising, and they're not. You can still see them through the glass, but you can't reach them anymore. The distance isn't rejection, it's elevation. And here's the mystery most believers never understand. God removes people from your life without explanation to protect you without guilt. Think about Abraham. Genesis 12:1 records God's command, "Leave your native country, your relatives, and your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you." God didn't say, "Abraham, those people are toxic." He didn't give a detailed explanation, he just said, "Go." And Abraham had to walk away from everything familiar, his father's house, his relatives, his homeland, not because they were evil, but because they couldn't go where he was called. That's you, right now. God is moving you, and some people simply can't come. Not because they're bad, not because you're better, but because their assignment is different. Their frequency is set to a different station. And if God let them stay in your life, they would either slow you down, or you would exhaust yourself trying to carry them. Here's what the enemy doesn't want you to know. What left you was never equipped for where you're going. That spouse who abandoned you in your 60s, they couldn't handle the version of you that God was building. That church that turned its back when you needed them most, they were operating in religion, and you were moving into relationship. Those friends who drifted away when you started getting serious about your faith, they loved the old you, the one who was safe, predictable, and stuck. But the transformed you, the healed you, the delivered you, they don't have the capacity for that level of light. Proverbs 13:20 warns us, "Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm." But sometimes the verse works in reverse. Sometimes you become wise, and the companions who aren't ready for wisdom naturally fall away. And I know it hurts. I know you've cried about it. I know there are nights when the silence feels heavier than the chaos ever did. I know you'd give anything to have your family understand you, to have your old friends back, to feel less alone in this new season. But what if the isolation isn't punishment? What if it's preparation? What if God is clearing your inner circle because He's about to bring you into rooms where the wrong voices could contaminate what He's building? You didn't lose people, chosen one. You lost access to what was holding you back. You lost permission to stay small. You lost the luxury of blending in. If separation hurt you deeply, but you refused to become bitter, if people walked away and you still chose kindness over revenge, grace over grudges, forgiveness over fury, then you need to declare it right now. Type in the comments, "I stayed clean." Because that right there, that's the final proof you passed. Anyone can stay sweet when life is easy, but to be abandoned and still love, to be misunderstood and still bless, to lose everyone and still trust God, that's not human strength, beloved. That's heaven's frequency flowing through human flesh. But here's the question that's going to determine everything about your next chapter. Now that you understand why they left, are you ready to discover who's coming? You've noticed something strange happening to you lately, haven't you? You don't react the way you used to. Someone cuts you off in traffic on the FDR drive, and instead of rage boiling up in your chest, there's just silence. Your daughter says something that would have triggered you 6 months ago, and now you just breathe. You watch the news, you see the chaos, you hear the lies, and something in you stays unmoved. At first, you thought you were getting old, losing your edge, becoming one of those people who just doesn't care anymore. But what if I told you something that will change everything you think is happening to you right now? God didn't make you weaker, He made you heavier. Listen to me carefully, chosen one. What you're experiencing isn't age, it's upgrade. You're not losing your fire, you're being refined into something this world has never seen in you before. The volume didn't go down, the frequency went up. You see, most people think God's transformation looks like sudden miracles, overnight breakthroughs, dramatic encounters that shake the ground beneath your feet. But that's not how He works with His chosen ones. With you, He operates like a master jeweler, working on the rarest diamond. Slowly, precisely, in absolute silence. Isaiah 30:15 says it plainly. In quietness and trust is your strength. Not in noise, not in constant activity, not in endless striving. In quietness. The Hebrew word there is shakat. It means to be settled, to rest, to be undisturbed, even when storms rage around you. That's what's happening inside you right now. God is rewiring your entire spiritual nervous system. Your reactions are slower because your discernment is sharper. You speak less because your words now carry the weight of eternity. You walk quieter because you've learned that lions don't roar before they strike. They move in deadly silence until the moment demands their voice. Think about Elijah, this mighty prophet who called down fire from heaven, who stood before kings and spoke judgment without trembling. But when God wanted to speak to him, really speak to him, it wasn't in the earthquake, it wasn't in the wind, it wasn't in the fire. 1 Kings 19:12 tells us God spoke in a still, small voice, a whisper. The original Hebrew describes it as the sound of sheer silence. Why? Because God was teaching Elijah the same thing He's teaching you right now. The most powerful force in the universe doesn't need to shout. You've spent decades proving yourself, fighting for your place, raising your voice so people would hear you, pushing and striving and working yourself to exhaustion, trying to make things happen. But God is saying, enough. I'm done with that version of you. I'm building something else. Right now, in this very moment, heaven is performing surgery on your soul. Every disappointment that didn't break you, that was spiritual bone density being built. Every betrayal you survived without becoming bitter, that was divine character being forged. Every time you chose to stay silent when you wanted to explode, that was God installing a new operating system in your spirit. You're being upgraded from reactive to responsive, from triggered to teachable, from loud to lethal. But here's what most people don't understand about this season. The world will misread you. They'll think you're passive when you're actually positioned. They'll call you weak when you're wielding power they can't comprehend. They'll mistake your silence for surrender when you're actually standing in the kind of authority that doesn't need to announce itself. This is why you feel different. This is why small talk exhausts you now. This is why you can't engage in petty arguments anymore. This is why you'd rather sit in silence than waste words on people who aren't ready to hear truth. God didn't make you quieter. He made you heavier. And heavy things don't float on the surface with everything else. They sink deep, they anchor, they become the foundation others build upon without even realizing it. If you feel quieter but stronger, if you sense something massive shifting inside you that you can't quite name, comment right now, "I feel the weight." Because what God is building in you through this silent season will determine who you become in the season that's coming. And beloved, what's coming requires someone who knows how to carry glory without announcing it. But the question burning in your spirit right now is this: if God has